welcome to First Fridays at the Cedars. It's good to see so many of you out. Dustin Wilgers is an outstanding professor of biology at McPherson College. His course reviews are great. He's an instructor who has high standards in his classroom. Students learn. And he's here this afternoon perhaps to help dispel some myths that some of us might have about spiders. Now, we'll see afterwards. I have to take a poll if he changes anyone's mind. But his schedule is tight this afternoon, so I want to turn it over to Monica at this point. And welcome, Dustin, and welcome, Monica.
Thank you so much, Steve. And yes, I don't know, the word terror is in the title of his presentation, so we'll see which direction this goes this afternoon. But we're anxious to hear from Dr. Wilgers. So with all of that, we thank you very much, Dustin, for being here.
Can anybody hear me? Okay, well, I don't know exactly how much I like having a topic about death after a topic about spiders. I think it sends the wrong message, but I guess we'll roll with it. Thank you guys for having me. I apologize, I'm dealing with a cold. I'm battling really hard, but it finally caught up to me today. And so my voice kind of flutters in and out, but I'm thankful to have a microphone that you guys can hear me. So I thought today that I'd like to share with you a little bit about kind of the two opposite ends of the spectrum here, how society is often terrified of these organisms, and in my mind, kind of unrightfully so. But they are a source of technology and actually offering a relatively bright future from where we can advance our society if we actually just take the time to get to know them a little bit better and actually study them a little bit more. It's kind of amazing to see some of the things that we're finding out and the applications that we can make towards our everyday lives, and I'd like to highlight a few of those things. I'll highlight a few of the oddities of spiders that have kind of helped me appreciate them more, and we'll kind of make our way through this presentation together. So, when you go out to any natural land, whether it's walking around the lake outside here on the paths that are nicely mowed for you, or going to a national park or a city park, and you see things like the wildlife, like we don't have moose around here, but we might have deer and elk, right? If you go over to Maxwell Wildlife Refuge, you might see some elk and some bison, and we go out there and you see things like this, and you immediately assign value to them, right? You want to see these things when you go out into natural areas, and you think that they provide us some sort of value because they're beautiful, right? They're important to us. Things like the wolf, right? They're valuable to our ecosystems and our natural areas, and they're things that we want to go out and see, right? And it starts to stretch our boundaries a little bit when we go out and we can look at wildflowers, right? And while they're beautiful, is it easy? Do you still assign value to them, right? Are they valuable to us? And many of you would probably say so. But what if we go one step further away from like the cute and cuddlies of the world, the furry animals that we so appreciate to see, and you go out to the national parks to go see? What about these things, right? Is it easy to think that these are valuable pieces to our planet, right? We respond to them in many times very negative ways, right? We're terrified oftentimes of these things. Or these things, right? The way we respond, the way we associate with things and organisms like this oftentimes is related to how valuable and how much we appreciate having them around, and by how we appreciate having them around, it influences how we behave and act towards them, right? I have a lot of conversations with people, most of them reporters, because a lot of my stuff that I do gets a lot of press, because People like reading about things that kind of mildly scare them, right? And I talk to, reporters commonly call me, and I deal with the same question all the time. What good is fill in the blank? Most of the time it's spiders, but it could be other things, other animals that they don't necessarily can picture as being a valuable piece of our ecosystem. What good is a spider to humans anyways? And as soon as they say that, like, I kind of know the question is coming, but it frustrates me nonetheless. And most of the time my reaction to that question shows my frustration a little bit. And they kind of interpret my frustration as me not understanding the question. And they're like, okay, well, no, let me rephrase that a little bit. What is their purpose, right? And I think about it, and I try to swallow my snark because I'm about to respond very snarkily to them and say, why does something have to have value for it to exist on our planet, right? Why does it have to have value to us, right? Why can't it just exist and us be happy with that, right? It's made it. Spiders have been on this planet for a little over 300 million years, right? We just got here 200,000 years ago, right? Why can't that be enough, right? Why can't that's really great. They've survived and existed on this planet for roughly 300 million years, more than we have, right? Why do we have to have them be good to us, right? So I avoid that snarky response. And then we go into things like, well, they're important predators in our ecosystem, and the things that they eat are also pests to us, right? And I go down the line of that. But the reporters I talk to on a regular basis don't see the connection, right? And it's those kind of things that I try to fight for, and I try to spread understanding about. In a lot of my talks, and I've been doing this, I've been funded by the Kansas Department of Wildlife and Parks to do these kinds of talks, and the events that I did up at the museum this weekend for the past 3 years. I've spoke to probably a little over, I think the number's probably about 900 kids and adults by this point, and I was adding up the number of people that I've affected, or at least come into contact with, either through my work that I've produced, my presentations and everything like that, and the number's probably a little over 2,500 people that I've talked to or come in contact with in the past 3 years, trying to spread this exact message that I'm sharing with you today, right? It's not surprising that we try to find value, or we have trouble finding value with spiders in our everyday life when media and movies and whatnot spread this message, right? It's clickbait, right? With spiders are scary, right? That wasn't a question. But the media is taking advantage of one of our predisposed conditions, right? Arachnophobia is the most common fear of an object that any person has. 50% of women suffer from some degree of arachnophobia. About 20% of men do. Okay, so you're not alone if you're scared of spiders. And we see constantly images in movies like this, right, pop up all around, playing upon that fear, right? And I think we've lost the point of what are we even scared about, right? Why are we scared of these things that are no bigger than our pinky nail, that can't do us any harm, right? And I'll talk to you more about that. I think a good quote from Yoda plays this, right? Fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, and hate leads to suffering, right? So oftentimes, when we fear something, we take out that fear and anger against it. And this is how we respond to spiders that come across our room or our house. Hi, spider. Nice spider. Let me pet you with my foot. Good spider. Dead spider. There's too many people shaking their heads yes that this is their response. This is such a common response that we've made video games out of it. You can earn tickets through your skill at stomping spiders, right? I'm sad to say that my daughter was really good at this game, and she earned a lot of tickets, and she got a hamburger eraser with all of the tickets that she then lost on the way home from the arcade because of her spider stomping skills. But this is something real, right? We respond to spiders in this way, right? And much of our fear has been attributed to a time in our human history where many humans interacted with spiders that very likely could kill them on a regular basis. That's not the case anymore, right? We have about 450 species of spiders in Kansas. How many do you think of those species are medically important to us? That means, when you say medically important, that means a bite would cause a regular medical reaction that should be treated. 2 species, right? And if you add one that was just introduced to the state and is kind of subsisting a little bit up in Kansas City, Lawrence area, we have 3, right? We have the black widow and the brown recluse. And then the yellow sac spider is the one that's up in the Lawrence, Kansas City area, but it's not persistent enough to actually be a stable population up there. But we have 2 out of 450. And the number doesn't go up that much when you look across the United States, where we see just under 4,000 or just under 5,000. It's like 4,500 species across the U.S. There's a few other species of black widow that we see, but there's not very many others. And as far as, we only have 1 recluse species that is actually shown to have a medical importance, right? So the fact is that the majority of spiders that we interact with on an everyday basis and see have no medical importance to us, right? And in fact, they're not aggressive. They're not looking to come and bite you, right? They are just, well, they're probably more scared of you than you are of it, if that's even possible. But yet we're still scared of them. And I think it is hard to understand and appreciate something that you don't know enough about. And so this is what I do. I go and talk and educate people a little bit more about spiders so that the more you know, the more you appreciate them and the less you have to fear. Okay? I obviously don't have a problem with spiders, but that hasn't always been the case. Before I started my Ph.D., which is where I actually started working on spiders, I had a mild arachnophobia. I was okay with them if they were across the room and I could approach them on my terms. But if they surprised me, I would regularly go running across the hallway or the room screaming, thinking it was on me, and heaven forbid if it actually did get on me, I don't know what I would have done. But there's a story of when and I still respond this way, it's kind of hard not to. When you're walking on a trail or something like that, and you run through a spider web, and that spider web gets in your face, like I still don't, I mean, if I don't know where the spider is, I'm like immediately trying to find it, and I run her. But when I was working at K-State on my master's, I was running around checking cover boards. I was working on snakes and lizards at that point. And I was walking through a trail, and I ducked underneath a tree, and I looked up, and as soon as I looked up, I got a face full of spider web. And as soon as I did that, I stood up real quick because I didn't know where the spider was, and I was standing underneath a locust tree. And if you know what locust trees are like, they have those gigantic spines. And one of those spines stuck me, right? It's like, I regularly say that a spider just almost killed me because of my response to it. But I survived it, and after I survived it, I went on to study them and I actually appreciate them a little bit more. But after studying them, I turned my fear kind of into a fascination, and I've spread that. I think that if you are born with a natural fear of spiders, it doesn't take long to overcome that fear, and in many cases, the environment that kids grow up in affects their response to the things that they might have a natural predisposition to be scared about. And so I shared my fascination with my kids, and my kids have no fear whatsoever of spiders, right? In fact, they don't have a healthy respect for them in my mind. There's a couple times where they have been running across a field with a wolf spider in their hands that even I wouldn't have picked up. And they're running across to show me what they found, right? I've broken the cycle of fear, right? I taught them from a very early age that they're nothing to be afraid about. And they're sharing that with others. And the next generation, their children, will have the same response. I've taken advantage of this. They like spiders so much that I actually use them in my research experiments. I try to use them to capture bigger spiders, so I use them as bait to capture big spiders. I have yet to capture this big spider. It lives down in Hutchinson. I haven't seen it yet, but I still try. When we go to the Hutchinson Zoo, I still have them lay there and wiggle around to see if I could ever get that spider to come out. But I've been unlucky about doing that so far. So here's the spider that changed my mind about arachnids and arachnophobia. I'm going to play the video. This is a video that I recorded in Nebraska. Let's see if I can. Do you hear that? So it's doing a courtship display. So it thinks there's a female around. And when it thinks there's a female around, this male will start waving its pedipalps, waving its leg, and vibrating the ground. This is the way they communicate with one another. So as soon as I saw this, I'm like, why the heck do they do that? Why are they doing all of those things at the same time? You can't really see it, but the front leg of this spider is all black. Females don't have black legs. Females have brown legs, right? The question is just immediate. I'm a scientist, and so I just needed to find out more, right? So here's the quick synopsis of what I found out about this spider in studying him for 5 years. So I found out that vibration is really important. If you take away vibration, females have a hard time accepting that male to mate with them. They will mate with just the visual display, but not nearly as often. Vibration is really important to wolf spiders. I found out that there's information that females might use in both the vibration and the visual display. It turns out that vibration, the intensity and the length and the duration of that vibration depends on how well that spider ate during its lifetime. Spiders that ate more produced that really, really intense point, that zzz, 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 right? Longer duration of that than spiders that didn't eat as much. I found out that there's information in the leg display. The dark leg, males that ate more when they developed, when they were young, produced legs that were darker than males that didn't eat as much. So if females cared about how well their mate had eaten, right, and if by chance want their offspring to be good predators just like their dad was, right, then they would pay attention to the foreleg color and the length of the courtship display and the length of that vibration. And it turns out they do. Females care. Whenever I take away all of the visual display and I just let them listen to the spider and I let them interact in the dark. So if you can imagine me in a dark closet with a pair of mating spiders and a pair of night vision goggles. So I'm sitting here staring down at these spiders with night vision goggles, watching what they do, right? When the females could just listen to males, they mated much more often with males that ate more. As far as the leg coloration goes, I found out that females care about the color of males' forelegs. They mate much more often with males that have black legs than brown. And the way I figured this out was by painting. So I took the spiders And I raised them all on the same diet, and I wanted everything else to be the same, but I just wanted the foreleg color to change. And so I took the spiders and I put them in a Ziploc bag, and I got them to stick their front legs out of a corner, and I took a Q-tip and I painted their legs either black or brown. They don't like that very much. That is one of the times I was bit while I was doing that. And I deserved it, right? I was painting their forelegs. But then I exposed females to the males that I'd painted black or brown, and females mated with the black forelegs much more often than the brown, right? I found out that females, their choice of a male depended on their age. Young females care. Old females stop being choosy. I am not going to extrapolate that to humans. People always try to get me to, and I can't do it. So in spiders, young females are choosy. Old females could care less. Whatever male comes across, they'll mate with them, and they mate at a very high frequency. So you can see, right? I went there, and I had to have my advisor convince me to work with spiders. It was like, okay, I'm a little bit nervous about this. I'm scared of them, right? You have to convince me that it's going to be okay and that these things are interesting. And 5 years later, I can't get enough of them, right? All right, so let's get back to... So what is a spider, right? So here's a drawing, an outline of a general spider. You can see a couple different characteristics here. They have two body parts, the cephalothorax and the abdomen. In the cephalothorax, you have the major structures like the brain, the stomach, the venom glands, and the muscles to run the legs. In the abdomen here, you have the heart, the intestines, the reproductive organs, the lungs, the silk glands. I think I got them all. There's a lot of stuff going on in the abdomen. So two body parts, 8 walking legs, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. A pair of pedipalps, which is another set of appendages. And on the very front is a pair of chelicerae, which is where the fangs are attached to, which deliver the venom. All spiders are venomous. Very, very common question that I have. It's just not all venom is important to us, right? The venom that they have is intended for their prey, not as necessarily a defense mechanism, right? They're not looking to bite us, right? They will bite only when provoked and only when defending themselves, which isn't very often. Okay, so seems very simple, right? 2 body parts, 8 legs. Notice where the legs are attached to. They're all attached to this front body segment right here. Okay, very simple to keep track of. Why is it that we have so much trouble representing a spider in society? I love Halloween. But here is a collection of the spider decorations that I have to choose from whenever I'm trying to buy spider stuff, right? This one has 1 body part, but at least it got the 8 legs right. This one has 1 body part with 8 legs. This has got 2 body parts and 8 legs, but they put the legs on the wrong body part. This one has the legs spread out over both body parts. I'm not sure what's going on, but they do have fangs and chelicerae. And this one is just, I don't even know what's going on with this one. It's only got 1 body part, and it's only got 6 legs, which makes me think it's an insect. But it's still only got, but it's hanging from silk, right? It's really hard. I've already been to Walmart and I've tried to buy all of their spider-related Halloween stuff already, but it's really hard to pick through the stuff that even represents spiders accurately. Okay, so I'm a professor. I like to give tests, so congratulations, you get to take a test today. So, which one's the spider? This one right here, okay? 3 body parts, 1, 2, 3. 6 legs, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and a pair of antennae. Okay, so here's the real test. Which one's the spider? How many say this one? How many say this one? How many say this one? How many say none of them? How many say all of them? They're all spiders, right? I like to give trick questions. So these are all spiders that mimic ants. Ants are chemically defended, which means things don't like to eat them. They have an acid inside of them that makes things sick. So if you look like an ant, then you're going to be defended. You look like you're defended like an ant. And so all of these are spiders that have the body shape 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 legs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3. This one was tricky because it's holding its front pair of legs up like an pair of antennae. So 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And they've actually changed the shape of their body parts to make it look like they have 3, but they still only have 2. It's just the shape of that body part has changed a little bit. Okay, here's your next test. Is this the deadliest spider in the world? This is one of the most common. So it's a granddaddy longlegs. But have you ever heard the old wives' tale that this is the deadliest spider in the world, but the fangs are too small to bite you? So there's a couple things wrong with that. First, it's not even a spider. It's a harvestman, or it's an arachnid, like spiders are, but they don't even have venom glands. They have their 2 body parts are actually fused together. There's the front half right here, and there's the back half. Right there, it's fused together to look like one. They do have 8 legs. They don't have venom glands. They are harmless completely. Okay? Okay, so when you look across the spider kingdom, we have a lot of different kinds. About 46,000 different species on the planet. Estimates are actually much higher than that. If you're an arachnologist and you like spiders, the data that came out about a year ago is exciting. They say that we've only identified about 20% of the spider species that exist on the planet. So that's saying that we probably have about 200,000 left to go find. Woohoo! We find them everywhere except Antarctica, so on every continent. And we have somewhere a little over 4,000 species in North America. Here's some of the different kinds, and I'll just point out a few of the different varieties and a little bit about them. Right? So this is one of the smaller species that we see. These are not much larger than the size of an eraser on your pencil. These are the Hawaiian happy face spiders. You can see the happy faces on the underneath side. All of them look just a little bit different. So there's some of the smaller species that we see. This is the largest species of tarantula that we have on our planet. It's the Goliath bird eater. Full adults are about 12 inches around, so the size of a dinner plate. Tarantulas they can get that size because they live somewhere, females do somewhere between 15 and 20 years. So they can get pretty large. They can achieve some pretty fascinating colors, like the blue ornamental metallic tarantula here. We get yellow orb weavers that have these gigantic spines. This has the rather unfortunate name of being called the ogre-faced spider. They have a rather unfortunate face. They have really large eyes. In fact, they have the largest, their eyes cover the largest proportion of their face of any animal on the planet. So I don't remember what the proportion is, but it's probably close to like 60% of their face is covered with eyes. Right? They're out and active at night. They hang upside down from a twig or a branch, and they've spun a web like a lot of other spiders do. But their web is held between their legs here. It's a real stretchy web, and they wait for something to walk underneath it, and then they zip down and they grab it and they twirl it up in their web, and then they zip back up into the canopy and they have their lunch. Other spiders spin webs and wait on things to fly through. This is the golden orb weaver. Their webs are strong enough that they can actually catch vertebrates like birds, like the one this was eating right there. These are found in southeastern U.S. and across Africa and Australia. They're found all over the place. And then we have this really interesting one up here. This is a jumping spider. It shows just about how intelligent spiders can be. Spiders have the ability to learn. They have a repertoire of communication that they can use. This one makes its living by eating other spiders. And the way it gets other spiders to come out of their den is it gets onto their sheet web, and it will start making a vibration of the species of spider that's in that web, trying to get the female to come out of the tube, and it makes the courtship display of the spider's web that it's on. And when that doesn't work, it switches to another species. And if those don't work, it switches to a prey item to make the female or the spider think that there's something caught in the web and that it needs to run out and get it. And as soon as it gets them to come out of that web or that tunnel, it catches it and it eats it, right? And so this is learning much like a mockingbird does around here, where it mimics displays and vibrations from the things around it. Not only do we have a lot of different kinds of spiders, but we have a lot of spiders across our planet. If you added up the total spider population across our planet, that would weigh somewhere in the range of 29 million tons or 478 Titanics, right? There are a lot of spiders, right? And they're all over the place. Here's some stories of spiders that I find kind of fascinating. And the more I research spiders, the more I kind of come across these really bizarre stories of behavior in the spider kingdom. The first one starts with a relative of the black widow. It's called the redback spider, found in Australia. And most of my bizarre stories surround mating, because that's what I was interested in, and I was interested in communication surrounding that. And so in the redbacks, when the male and the female are mating, when the male inserts his pedipalp to start transferring sperm over to the female, he does this somersault. And so the female is laying upside down here, and the male inserts his pedipalp and will somersault his abdomen into the female's fangs. And the female will then start eating the male while they're mating. And he does this on purpose. Right? The reason he does this is the longer he keeps her busy eating, the longer they are able to mate. The longer they're able to mate, the more sperm he's able to transfer. The more sperm he's able to transfer, the more offspring and spiderlings he fathers. The likelihood that he goes and lives through this, right, even if he wasn't to offer himself as a meal, the likelihood that he leaves and finds another female to mate with is almost 0%. So he literally invests everything into one reproduction. He has a choice, though. He doesn't have to do that, and not all spiders do. But the ones that do are the ones that are most successful. The fishing spider down here on the left here, males don't have a choice in this one. And this is even more bizarre. So this is the female dark fishing spider. These are found locally. You'd find these if you went to any stream. You could find the females here are about 6 inches around, relatively heavy-bodied. Males really, really small, about probably 1/20th of the size of the female, by mass at least. The bizarre thing that happened here, this was actually found at the University of Nebraska when I was going to school there, and I was working with the graduate student who was trying to figure this out. And so we would toss ideas back and forth all the time to try and figure out what's going on here. But when the male mates with the female, when he finally inserts his pedipalp and starts to transfer sperm, as soon as that happens, the male has a massive heart attack and dies instantly. that male is able to mate once in his life, and as soon as he does that, he dies of a massive heart attack. After that happens, the female takes the male and she eats him. And then what we found out is that when she eats him, spiderlings that grow from females that eat the male, the spiderlings are heavier. There's more of them, and they survive longer through bouts of starvation than spiderlings whose mother did not eat the male. The last one is another fishing spider over here. In this one, the female is right here, and you can't really see this close up, but around this, the female's legs are all bunched up around her body. And that's because the male, before he mates with her, wraps her up and ties her up with silk. So he ties all of her legs together so she can't move. And then after they mate, he then gets away. The reason he has to tie her up is because after they mate, if they don't, she will eat him. And by tying her up, it gives him just a split second longer to dart away without the female trying to capture him. So here's some of the interesting pieces that relate spiders to kind of society and technology today. So all spiders produce silk. This is one of the interesting features about them, and this is actually one of the more useful features that we are trying to apply to technology today. So they make their silk and they release it out of these glands at the back called spinnerets. Okay, some spiders use their silk to balloon. We regularly see, if you go outside right now and you see these strands of silk kind of floating across the air, there's oftentimes a very, very tiny spider attached to that, and that's their dispersal mechanism. As soon as they hatch, they let a piece of silk go, and they get picked up like a parachute. Other spiders use their webs as either a home, as a home for thousands. So this is a colonial spider where hundreds, and we've seen colonies in the rainforest that get up to a football field size large, that hold millions of spiders all operating as one society or one colony. And we also see others that can function individually, and they use them to try and capture their prey. Sometimes their silk can get out of control. When you get a lot of spiders in a small area, you get things that happen like this, where you get entire fields coated in silk. All of these trees are wrapped up in silk. What happened here was, if back here, this whole ground got flooded. So all of the spiders that lived in the grassy fields, once it got flooded, they moved up, and they couldn't move any higher, and so they all got concentrated up into these trees. And when you have a whole bunch of spiders producing a whole bunch of silk, you wrap the trees in silk completely.
What are those green things coming out?
This?
Yeah.
Those are the small spinneret glands. So this is spider. This is a part of the spider, and the purple is the silk under the picture from the microscope. Yeah. So when you look close at the tip of the spider and the spinnerets right here, it looks like this. They're like little tubes that inside the spider, that silk is liquid. As it exits, it turns from liquid to solid. So we've started to use silk for a variety of reasons in our society. Pound for pound, spider silk is stronger than stainless steel and approaching that of Kevlar. These are two unnatural products that are produced in situations that take a lot of heat and a lot of pressure to make. Spiders are able to produce a compound, a material that outperform stainless steel under natural temperatures and natural pressures. Not only is this spider silk strong and flexible, but it's antimicrobial naturally. Doctors are starting to take notice to this, and we're starting to try and find ways to create living implants where you use silk to stitch together human joints, nerve cells, and this biomaterial that is now holding your body together internally. Because it is a biomaterial itself, when it is done with its job, guess what it does? It gets reabsorbed. It's made of protein just like you and I. We're starting to recognize the usefulness. There's actually, because of how strong it is, they've started to think of ways to make things like bulletproof vests with spider silk. But we just have a problem with the collection part of it. Right? So this is an actual method that they use to try and collect silk from spiders. Here's a spider pinned down. The spinnerets are pointing away, and they start gathering the silk on this spool. And once you start collecting silk, the spider will just continue to release it for a while, and you can gather up a pretty good spool of silk. But we don't have enough spiders to create enough silk to be able to do industrial level manufacturing with it. So that's where goats come in. We've been able to bioengineer goats to produce the proteins that we find in spider silk. We've also been able to bioengineer bacteria to do the same thing. So we can have other organisms produce the proteins that are important in silk. But up until recently, we've had a hard time turning that liquid protein into solid material. Recently, there's a couple up-and-coming technology companies that have been able to produce artificial silk using these proteins. Now, the fibers that they're able to create are relatively small because the proteins that they're able to put together and stitch together are small relative to what the spider is actually able to produce. We're not able to actually manufacture the complexity of spider proteins that actually make up silk in general yet. So we're constrained to producing smaller, not quite as functional silk as what the spiders would be able to produce. But it's a step in the right direction. And we've actually been able to manufacture enough of this to create articles of clothing. This is actually the first shoe that is made of completely synthetic silk. If anybody's looking at getting me a Christmas present, I would love that. This is a North Face jacket made out of completely made out of synthetic spider silk. Here's some other applications of silk. Birds have a really hard time recognizing windows, right? They fly into them all the time. They don't have a hard time flying through spider silk. Spider silk reflects ultraviolet light, and so and many birds can see ultraviolet light, and so they can avoid flying through these webs. So engineers are starting to construct window panes, and if you look, you actually can see spider webbing embedded into this window pane that would allow birds to see it, but us still to be able to see right through it. So by manufacturing something that has the properties of spider silk, we're able to limit our effects on other animals that are having a hard time dealing with that. Another one, so the glue that many spiders attach to their silk, right? That's how they capture insects, is they attach little tiny glue droplets to their capture threads. What we found is that different types of webs have different types of glue. And that cobwebs, webs that are found in the corners of your rooms and up in the top corners, the glue in the cobwebs have different properties than the glue of the typical nice, pretty orb web. And that as humidity changes, the glue found in the cobwebs retain the same elasticity and the same stickiness regardless of humidity levels. In orb webs, the glue increases in elasticity and stickiness as humidity goes up. So we're able to actually, if we can actually mimic the properties of this cobweb glue, we can create an adhesive that retains elasticity and its stickiness at the same level regardless of the humidity level, and it can fluctuate back and forth. So we're actually able to construct something that mimics something that an organism already creates that might be useful for our everyday lives. Last application to society real quick. So we've had a really tough time with honeybees, right? The honeybee declines are documented all across the US, right? And the declines have been linked to the application of synthetic pesticides. The application of pesticides to control insects that normally feed on our crops have the same effect on the central nervous system of bees as they do the pests that we're intending. Researchers have found that there's a spider venom that has an effect on all of those things that we're trying to get rid of, aphids, grasshoppers, all of those things, without affecting bees. So if we can mimic the molecule that's found in spider venom and apply that to our crops, we can actually directly target the things that we don't want in our ground and keep around honeybees for a little longer, which we rely on so heavily for pollination. Okay, so the last thing, spiders play an important role in our ecosystem. Because of their place as a consumer, they're a top-level consumer and probably the top-level invertebrate consumer, meaning they eat a lot of other insects. They do not eat plants. There's only a couple examples of spiders actually being able to live on plant material. That's not the norm. Most of the time they're eating insects, and those insects that they're eating are considered pests to us, or they're eating the food that we eat. So like caterpillars, grasshoppers consuming them. We also see them consuming things like flies and mosquitoes, which are disease vectors. So they are an important part of an ecosystem, and they eat things that affect us in a negative way. And they eat a lot of those things. It's estimated that each spider consumes about 2,000 insects a year. When you add up all of the prey items that a spider would consume, that the global spider population consumes, when you add all that up and you weigh it, or you estimate the weight of it, we couldn't actually weigh it, the global body mass of all the humans on our planet right now, kids and adults, all of them combined, estimated to be about 350 million tons. Any idea what the amount of prey that the global spider population consumes on a yearly basis? This is not over 10 years, this is not over 20 years, this is in 1 year. Any ideas? The low end of the estimate is 400 million tons. The high end of the estimate is 800 million tons. So, can you imagine, so many news agencies and reporters could have looked at this as, look at all the good that spiders are doing for this, but can you guess what the headlines were to get people to click on it? If they wanted to, spiders could consume all of the humans on Earth in 1 year. All right. So it could be much bigger. So, I hope I've made you reconsider just a little bit about the value of spiders and how just really connected we are to them. Even though we don't know it, a lot of the technology that we have now and that we will have in the future might be based on something that we know very little about. Okay? But we could know if we take some time to actually do some studying. Okay. I'll be glad to take questions. I have about 5 or 6 minutes before I have to scurry on out and pick up my daughter from elementary school. Yeah.
Do all spiders make webs?
No, all of them leave silk, but not all of them make organized webs like you'd see hanging from a tree. So some of them leave silk behind as kind of a dragline silk that is kind of a safety harness. So if they're crawling on grass and they might fall, right, they actually could stop and lower themselves down a little bit slower. Some of them just use silk to line their burrows. So they build a burrow underground and they line it with silk so it doesn't collapse on them. Others build organized webs. Some of them build less organized webs, but all of them make silk, just not all of them make webs.
Dustin, male and females make webs or make silk, and the other question is the length of life.
So yes, males and females both make silk. Early on in their life, males will build a web to capture prey. If they're an orb weaver, if they're not, if they're a ground dweller like a wolf spider, they won't ever build a web. But they still all produce silk. When they mature, the orb weavers, the males will actually stop making a web, and they'll go out and search for a female's web, and they'll find that, and they'll kind of attach to that and wait for the female to mature, or if she's already mature, try to mate with them. And then the length of life, it varies. So a lot of the spiders that we deal with and we see on a regular basis are essentially annuals. They go through their whole life cycle in 1 year. But many of the larger ones take a little bit more time, and so you can see 2 to 3 years. Tarantulas are by far the exception. Longest live, 15 to 20 years for females. Males, much shorter than that, 6 to 10 years. Once they mature and once they become a mature male, they have about a year left to live. So all of the mass migrations and the movements of tarantulas down in southern Kansas and Oklahoma, where you see them crossing the road and you hear about them crossing the road a lot, those are all males out in search for females. Females are underground in their burrow waiting on a male to find them.
One more question?
Yeah.
When I was, my kids were little, and I was going down the hall at bedtime, and here was this huge, I think, wolf spider at the end of the hall, and I was really scared. And so I thought I'd kill it. And I guess they carry their little ones on their back.
They do.
And here all these little ones started going into the bedroom under the
Yeah, so wolf spiders are one of the few spider species that give parental care past hatching of the egg sac. So they'll carry around their spiderlings on their back for a week or two after they hatch. Yeah, and that's a very common thing.
I guess they aren't poisonous, are they?
No, well, so they all of them are venomous, but wolf spiders generally don't carry a venom that that we react to. Most of them have a venom that's the equivalent of a bee sting. Some wolf spiders are more aggressive than others, meaning that it takes less provoking for them to bite. But I'll always remember the thing that my advisor in my Ph.D. told me when I was trying to be convinced to work on spiders. I was like, okay, you're going to have to tell me, what does it feel like to get bit? Because she'd been working on them for almost 20 years at that point. And her response was, well, if it ever happens to you, you'll have to tell me. And I'm like, wait a minute. You've been working right hands-on for 20 years with these spiders, and you've never been bitten. She's like, no, they're not that aggressive. And sure enough, 2 years later, I was the first one to get bit in the lab. I was working with a slightly more aggressive spider, and I wasn't near as careful as I could have been. If I would have used things like this to kind of move them around, I would never have been bit either. But when you're working with, at my lowest, I had 600 wolf spiders that I had to take care of. At my highest, at one point, I had 1,500 that I was trying to work with at the same time. I don't have a whole lot of time to find pencils, so I use my fingers a lot, and I just move them around, and after a while, they get tired of that.
What did it feel like?
It itched, so it felt like a pinprick, like you just got poked with a needle just real quick, and then 5 minutes later, it was itchy and red. 20 minutes later, I forgot it happened, and I went back to the same thing I was doing later. to get bit the first time?
I was bit by a black widow spider once. Had quite a time
Oh
getting my health back.
Yeah, where did you encounter one to get bit?
I lived here in Cedars.
Uh-huh.
He got in my bathroom some way, and I looked up, but something bit me, and
Uh-huh.
I knew something, so I looked in, turned the light on, and tried to see, and there was a black widow spider up above the door in my bathroom.
Interesting. Oh no. Yeah, those are ones that you definitely have to be careful of, and those things happen, and oftentimes chance encounters like that do happen. The most common ways that people get bit by a brown recluse are when you're putting on clothes, right? If you have clothes on the floor, they're a recluse by nature. That's their name, and so they like dark, undisturbed places. If they crawl into your pant leg or whatever, and all of a sudden you pick those pants up and you put them on, and the spider feels pinched, and they feel stressed because this is pushing against you and their leg. They bite out a defense, and that oftentimes leaves with a bite on your leg or your arm, or if they get up into your bed and you roll on top of them in the middle of the night, and then the pinch, right? So I always tell, and this is part of my public service announcement, parents love this. Like, kids, keep your room clean. Make your bed. Don't throw laundry on the floor, right? Put it in the laundry basket. And they're like, thank you. This is the one way they're going to get them to actually to clean their
Quite
room.
a time getting that healed up.
Yeah.
Quite a bit of doctoring.
Yeah, that's widows. We do have an anti-venom. For brown recluse, there's not. It's pretty much keeping the wound clean and trying to avoid secondary infection. Yeah.
Good. I think we need to wrap it up. Dustin needs to pick up his daughter from school, and so we want to say thank you and remind you, Dustin gets out there a lot, so look for other opportunities, and maybe you'll have chances to ask good questions. So thank you so much again, Dr. Wilgers.